He's long been active in New Hampshire conservative politics, but now he wants to play a bigger role in the discussion. Former state senator and current Carroll County Commissioner Mark Hounsell of Conway joins us today. Senator and Councilor, Commissioner, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for having me.
So this term paleo-conservative, I know some people might have heard this, but for those who haven't, what does it mean to be a paleo-conservative?
Well, really, it's my estimation, my definition is a true conservative. People throw around the terms really willy-nilly and without any definition to it. Paleo-conservative is a conservative from the old school. A paleo-conservative would be someone like Pat Buchanan, perhaps, or Ronald Reagan. Paleo-conservatives started kind of disappearing from the political scene after George H.W. Bush, and then we had the neocons come, and then from there they went into Tea Party and all the different definitions. So I've tried real hard to grow as times change, but hang on to the conservative ideals that really built America in the Republican Party into what it once was. So I use the term because it's accurate. Paleo-conservatives put America first. I actually promote American exceptionalism. I believe America is an exceptional place throughout the history of the world. The American experiment, it's been called, is not over. But its roots are found in what I would say is a paleo-conservative expression.
Mm-hmm. And as a paleo-conservative, where does that put you on the spectrum vis-a-vis President Donald Trump? Because we've seen some more traditionalist conservatives, such as former Senator Gordon Humphrey, who have taken a very strong tack against the president, and indeed calling out, along with some Democrats, what they see are perhaps autocratic tendencies developing within the White House. Where do you fall on that spectrum, and do you see those tendencies and worry about them?
Well, no, I don't worry about anything because, you know, that's meditating on the lies of the devil. I don't worry. I look at things and I make an analysis, and President Trump is different, and he does offend people's sensibilities. There's times when he's left me scratching my head. You know, so it's kind of hard to really figure out what he's doing because it's never been done that way before. So I look at results, and I support his American First concept. I support his immigration policies. Not all of them, you know. He expresses things that aren't necessarily the way I feel, but I think it's on the right track. And so I don't know where he falls in the spectrum. He's defining himself in his own way. But I do know this, that the extreme views of either the right or the left have put a stranglehold on American politics. They holler at each other. The right is hollering at the left, and the left is hollering at the right, and the people who are in the middle are listening to two screaming sides, where the consensus is in the middle. So in that sense, I like where the administration is headed. We have a stronger economy. We're starting to understand that American role in the world needs to be better defined. We can't be everywhere doing everything. So I'm optimistic about the future.
Yeah, you served in Concord a few decades ago. Can we get back to that? I mean, people idealize this sort of working across the aisle, but do you think that's something that America can regain?
I do. I think what we're facing in 2018 is a renaissance, if you will, of the better days. GOP Chairman Jeannie Forrester has said that she wants to make New Hampshire red again. And boy, I commend her for that, because what that means, disgruntled former Republicans. I left the party. I've left it and come back, and I've left and come back. That's because the party leaves me. I haven't really changed much. But when Chairman Forrester says she wants to make New Hampshire red again, that's a call for people like myself to come back to the party. As the Republican Party is starting to moderate and move to the center to pick up the Senate votes, we're seeing the Democrats running almost as fast as they can to the left, and so they're going to lose those votes. So So yeah, I think this is the time where we're going to see a renaissance again.
Speaking of votes in Washington, they're hammering out a budget deal there that's going to keep the government funded, get rid of sequestration, which was very onerous for our military for a few years there. This all to avoid another government shutdown. Obviously, this is a massive deal, but it has kind of irked some conservatives in Congress. Would you be voting for this if you were in Congress right now?
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen the details of it. I've been called, Mark Garang, the publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, called me a policy wonk. I thought he was insulting me until I found out that that's sort of a compliment. So I don't speak on policy of laws that I haven't read. There's things in sentences and paragraphs that you got to be careful of it. But as far as the whole thing about the budget, it speaks to the inability of Congress to work. See, what has happened is the three branches of government, the legislative branch, most important one, has lost its way. It's not doing its job. It's the weakest branch. It's supposed to be the strongest, but in application, it's the weakest. That's probably because they're spending half their time dialing for dollars. You know, they go down to Washington, and then their big job is to make sure that they don't get replaced. And they put in 30 hours a week they're required, regardless of party, to go march down like what do they call
telemarketers?
Telemarketers, yeah. They go down and they sit for 30 hours a week. All right, now these guys are getting paid $174,000 a year. I did some math out. They're $54 million it's costing the American people, American taxpayers, in salaries lost by having members of Congress reduce the dignity of the House of Representatives to become telemarketers and sit 30 hours a week making phone calls to raise money so that they can stay there. That's the huge problem that we're facing right now, is Congress is so busy raising money that they're not doing their job.
Do you believe in term limits?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The worst thing to do to a person is to put them into an atmosphere where they exercise authority and power for too long. It gets to them. And it's good to change the deck.
Shuffle things up there.
Yeah, and you got as many as 80 new congressmen are going to be elected. And this is a chance for the people to take back their house. A House of Representatives, I'm not talking the Senate. Senate's a different thing. But the House of Representatives is the people house. And what has happened with money and the whole dialing for dollars thing is they've turned the people's house into a den of thieves. And I mean a den of thieves, because there's so many string attached to every dollar that they get that they're neutered. They're not able to do their job.
You have some very interesting writings on your website that sort of take you outside the box a little bit. You think education funding is very important. Explain what you would like to see change, or perhaps put more money towards in terms of education.
I think we're experiencing in New Hampshire right now a great expansion of education. It's as though everyone's starting to understand what we can do with education. My most enjoyable job is on the Conway School Board. What we are seeing in education now is a shift from content and standards to competency-based. See, but in the old days, the standard base, they're still in place, but Conway's changing, and it's the wave of the future. Competency-based education is the way to go. The internet allows you to get content. So you don't need to go and sit in a classroom and have a teacher tell you about content. You have content on your iPad. Any child can pick up a phone and get content. They can study anything off a computer. But competency is the way to go. Now, that shift allows for local control to be more pronounced. And so in New Hampshire, I celebrate Senate Bill 193 to give parents and students choice. But the thing that holds us up, and I've had 30 years working with policy on education, the things that really keep us from being able to advance education in New Hampshire and in America, is the Federal Department of Education. In America, we spend $1.1 trillion on education. The federal government contributes 8% of that. They have a large budget, but they have a small staff. That staff is not doing anything to promote education. That staff, that whole department, is not needed. And I just want to go down and have them explain to me, why do we have a Federal Department of Education? Why
you'd like to see that funding come back to the states, though.
Absolutely.
But be increased, though, is what I read correctly.
Well, what I want to see is more funding to education, because that's our way out. All these children who are born need to be educated into a changing world, and they need to have an education that makes them competent to be citizens, and we're not doing that. Or we haven't been doing that.
I want to get to one more topic here. You're a staunch defender of Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
We've seen in Congress some movement towards a ban on bump stocks. That's the feature that was involved in the mass shooting in Las Vegas last year. Let's take a step back from that. Rather than ban or not, we hear a lot about quote-unquote common sense gun legislation. Do you believe there is such a thing, and should Congress be doing anything to limit firearms?
What Congress should do is understand that shall not infringe is a pretty simple sentence. Shall not infringe means shall not infringe, and so you got to be careful when you break away from that constitutional provision. You can't do that simply with legislation. If they really want to address gun control, change the Constitution, but until you do, that rules the land.
You want to be a voice from the northern wilderness. Explain exactly what that would be in Washington.
Well, I have been a voice from the northern wilderness for my whole 40 years of doing this. I love New Hampshire. I love everything about New Hampshire. I seldom leave New Hampshire. I'm not looking forward to having to go to Washington, but when I go to Washington, I'm going to tell them what it's like in New Hampshire. I'm not going to allow them to buy our district. What's going on right now, and I'm surprised no one's picking up on it, is the way that money is funneling into election. There's a candidate running in the Democratic side, Maura Sullivan. She's raised over $400,000, probably $500,000 now. And she moved into the state just 7 months ago. And yet all this money is flooding into her campaign. And I spent some time looking at it. And it's not coming from New Hampshire. The Indiana Democratic Committee sent her $1,000. Now, if I was Chris Pappas or Mark McKenzie, I'd be livid over a state, a Democratic committee in another state sending money to a particular candidate in New Hampshire. Money has become terrible influence. I'm running the campaign. I'm running third in the Republican primary for now, but the election isn't until September.
Right.
I'll win.
And it'll be wide open, and it'll be something to see as we wrap up here, that perhaps a Hounsell-Sullivan race would be a very interesting one to see. But we got to wrap up, Senator and Commissioner. We thank you for your time.
Well, we need more time because I got a lot more to say.
That's all right. We'll get back to you again later
you.
in the race. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Adam.